The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a bomb waiting to detonate. Thick, crisp, and stamped with some fancy legal firm's logo, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. My fingers left faint smudges on the pristine paper as I flipped through the pages, each paragraph twisting the knife deeper. According to her lawyer's carefully crafted narrative, I was the reason her life had stalled, an emotionally distant workaholic who'd stifled her ambitions. She claimed she'd put her career on hold to support mine, playing the role of the perfect wife while I chased success. Now she wanted compensation, a lot of it. The numbers on the page made my stomach clench. Monthly alimony that would have covered a mortgage plus half of everything I'd built. I set the papers down and stared out the window, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. The irony was almost funny. She was the victim? She deserved to be taken care of? I knew better. For months, I'd ignored the signs, the unexplained charges on our shared credit card, the late-night girls' trips that never included photos with actual friends, the way her phone always seemed to face down when I walked into the room. I'd told myself I was being paranoid, that trust was the foundation of marriage. But then I'd started digging, and what I found wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated performance. While I'd been working myself ragged, she'd been living a double life, one that had nothing to do with sacrifice and everything to do with indulgence. Now, she wanted a payout for it. I exhaled slowly, running my thumb over the embossed letterhead. Fine. Let her play the victim in court. I had receipts. The first red flag was the lipstick, not hers. I found it in the passenger seat of her car, a shade too dark, too bold for her usual understated style. When I held it up under the garage light, she snatched it from my fingers with a nervous laugh. Oh, that old thing. Must have fallen out of my gym bag. But she hadn't been to the gym in months. That was the moment the cracks started spreading. The late-night notifications lighting up her phone. The sudden girls' weekends in Vegas where she'd text back in clipped, careless sentences. The way she'd started dressing up for errands, coming home with flushed cheeks and a rehearsed alibi about traffic. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress was making me paranoid. But then the credit card statements arrived. $400 at a boutique hotel downtown on a Wednesday. A client lunch, babe. You know how fancy these investors are. $1,200 at a men's jewelry store. A gift for Dad's birthday. Her father wore a $20 Casio. The final straw was the weekend I came home early from a business trip. The house smelled like citrus vodka and unfamiliar cologne. She stood frozen in the kitchen, a half-empty wine glass in hand as I dropped my suitcase. You're back early. Flight got moved up, I said, watching her throat move as she swallowed. Oh. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, welcome home. That night, I waited until she passed out in a Xanax haze, then scrolled through her iPad, still logged into her iCloud from baking recipes she'd pulled up for me last month, deleted texts with a 212 area code, Uber receipts to an apartment in Tribeca, a selfie of her in a black lace bra I'd never seen before, time-stamped 3 hours after she'd kissed me goodbye that morning. I didn't confront her. Confrontation meant tears, meant gaslighting, meant, how could you violate my privacy, twisting me into the villain? So I became a ghost instead. The next day, I wired $3,000 cash to a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop who specialized in catching cheating spouses. I don't need drama, I told him, sliding the envelope across the diner table. I need proof. Then I went to Best Buy. 3 miniature cameras, one in the living room bookshelf, one disguised as a phone charger in the bedroom, one in the lake house where she'd started meditation retreats. All synced to a hidden cloud folder. For 3 weeks, I watched. I waited. I let her dig the grave deeper. And when the divorce papers finally came, I didn't sign them. I expected rage when the first video loaded. Instead, I felt cold. The timestamp read 1:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days after I'd left for the Denver conference. The living room camera caught her stumbling through the front door, giggling as she kicked off her heels. A man's hands gripped her waist from behind, his Rolex glinting under the entryway light, the same watch I'd seen in her deleted photos. Shh, the neighbors, she slurred, pressing a finger to his lips before leading him toward our bedroom. I fast-forwarded. The lake house footage was worse, Memorial Day weekend, when she'd claimed her girlfriends were joining her for yoga and detoxing. The camera caught her poolside with 2 men, popping champagne as one whispered in her ear. Her laugh carried through the speakers, that bright fake sound she used at my work parties. "Relax, baby," she purred, peeling off her bikini top. "His credit card's the only husband I need this weekend." By the time I got to the bedroom clips, I was numb. There she was, in our bed, with men whose faces I'd never know, laughing about how easy it was to play the dutiful wife. One video showed her bragging to a girlfriend on speakerphone. "The judge will give me half his company plus alimony. All I had to do was fuck him twice a month and pretend to like golf." But the real gem came from her own phone. The PI had tapped her iCloud backup, a treasure trove of deleted texts and voice memos. One stood out, a 3 a.m. recording of her coaching some guy through his divorce. "Just say she's abusive," her voice hissed. "Get a restraining order first. Judges eat that shit up." I compiled it all, timestamps, transcripts, bank records showing the $12,000 she'd funneled to a secret account. Even her Google search history, how to fake domestic violence claims the week before she filed. The night before the hearing, my lawyer stared at the flash drive like it was radioactive. "This is excessive," he admitted. "We could just subpoena her Venmo." I slid the divorce papers across the table. She wanted war. The drive glinted under the office lights. 6 months of evidence, all leading to tomorrow. One way or another, this ended in that courtroom. The air in the courtroom smelled like old wood and anticipation. I sat stiffly in my chair, my fingers tapping against the polished table as her attorney, a slick-haired shark in a $3,000 suit, painted his masterpiece of victimhood. "Your Honor, my client sacrificed her prime earning years to support her husband's career," he declared, gesturing dramatically toward my ex. She sat perfectly composed in a demure navy dress, a single tissue clutched in her hands like a prop. She deferred her own professional dreams to manage their home, and now, as she faces this painful transition, she seeks only what's fair under the law. I almost laughed. The Oscar-worthy performance, the trembling lip, she'd rehearsed this for months. The judge, a weary-looking woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, flipped through their motion. "Counselor, these alimony requests are substantial." "Respectfully, Your Honor, my client's needs are substantial," he countered smoothly. "She has no current income, no marketable skills after years out of the workforce. Without spousal support, she faces financial ruin." I watched my ex dab at dry eyes, her gold bracelet glinting under the fluorescent lights. The same one I'd seen in the lake house video, wrapped around another man's wrist as he pulled her into the pool. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may?" The judge nodded. "We don't dispute that Ms. Reynolds is entitled to a fair settlement," he began, his voice calm. "But we do dispute the narrative that she was a devoted homemaker who sacrificed her career." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the flash drive. "In fact, we have compelling evidence that Ms. Reynolds not only misrepresented her contributions to the marriage, but actively engaged in conduct that would invalidate her claims for support." Her lawyer scoffed. "Your Honor, this is clearly a desperate attempt to—" "I'd like to see it," the judge interrupted. A paralegal plugged the drive into the courtroom monitor. For a second there was only silence, then the screen flickered to life. The first clip played without sound, but it didn't need audio. There she was, in our living room, tangled up with a man whose hands were everywhere but polite. The timestamp in the corner read June 12th at 3:22 a.m., the same night she'd told me she was at her mother's. The courtroom gasped, her face drained of color. The judge's expression hardened as my lawyer advanced the footage. More dates, more men, more lies. Then came the audio clips, her laughing about playing the system, her bragging about bleeding me dry, her coaching her lover on how to fake abuse claims in his own divorce. By the time the screen went dark, her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The judge removed her glasses slowly. "Ms. Reynolds, do you have anything to say?" My ex opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Motion for spousal support denied." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood, straightened my tie, and walked out, past her muffled sobs, past her lawyer's frantic whispers, past the life I'd almost let her destroy. Outside, the sun was blinding. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The text started an hour after the hearing. We need to talk. You took this too far. Call me. I silenced my phone and slid it into my pocket, watching through the cafe window as rain slicked the sidewalks of downtown. My lawyer had warned me this would happen. The desperate reachback, the sudden willingness to work things out. Across the table, my younger brother stirred his coffee with a grim smile. So she finally realized you weren't bluffing. I pulled up the court's online docket, refreshing the page until the updated ruling appeared. Motion for reconsideration denied. Case dismissed with prejudice. She realized the money's gone. The real show started 2 days later when TMZ picked up the story. Someone, likely one of the court clerks, had leaked snippets of the footage, and suddenly my ex was internet infamous. The videos were grainy, just clear enough to be damning. Suburban wife's alimony scheme backfires spectacularly. Her Instagram went private, then deleted entirely. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was her divorce attorney, his polished tone fraying at the edges. My client is willing to drop all future claims if you agree to a mutual NDA. I laughed outright. Tell her I'll see her on Judge Judy. But the sweetest justice came 3 weeks later. I was reviewing security footage from my lake house when I spotted movement at the property line. The camera zoomed in on a familiar figure trudging through the rain in 4-inch heels. My ex, there to retrieve the designer luggage she'd stashed in the guest house. The new security system recognized her face instantly. Unauthorized entry flashed across the monitor as the automated warning blared, "You are trespassing on private property. Police have been notified." I watched through the camera as she froze, mascara running down her cheeks, before bolting back to her Uber. She left empty-handed. That night, I poured myself a whiskey and opened the final email from my PI. Attached was a screenshot of her latest Venmo transaction. $5,000 sent to @LawyerGuy with the memo, "Retainer refund?" I forwarded it to my attorney with one line, "Think we're done here." As I shut my laptop, a notification popped up, a calendar reminder for what would have been our anniversary. I deleted it without hesitation. Somewhere across town, she was probably crying into a cheap cocktail, rewriting history in her head. But in the quiet of my house, no longer ours, never again, there was only peace, and the faint click of a deadbolt sliding home. The letter arrived 6 months to the day after the judge's ruling. Thick ivory stationery with embossed letterhead from a law firm I didn't recognize. "Dear Mr. Carter, we represent the New York State Bar Association's disciplinary committee." I nearly spilled my coffee. They were investigating her attorney for ethical violations. Turns out he'd known about her schemes, had even coached her on which lies would play best in court. The PI's final report had made its way to the right people. My phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. There she was. Paparazzi shots of my ex leaving some midtown office building, sunglasses hiding swollen eyes. The caption made me choke on my toast. "Failed gold digger hit with civil suit by former lover after texts reveal coordinated alimony plot." I opened the linked article to find NYC Drew 87 himself, some hedge fund bro, suing her for emotional distress and fraud. His filing included screenshots of her promises. "Just play along and we'll split the settlement." The universe, it seemed, had a sense of poetic justice. That afternoon, I received one last notification. A bank transfer for the full amount she drained from our joint accounts. The memo line simply read, "Judgment satisfied." I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The sun was setting over the city that had nearly destroyed me. Somewhere out there, she was learning the hardest lesson of all. Karma always collects, and interest compounds. I almost didn't recognize her when she approached me outside the courthouse. 6 months of stress had carved new lines around her mouth, her once pristine highlights now grown out into brassy streaks. She clutched a manila envelope like a life preserver, her knuckles white against the cheap paper. "You happy now?" Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual honeyed affect. I adjusted my tie, watching a pair of lawyers rush past us toward the parking garage. "Should I be?" She shoved the envelope at my chest. "They revoked his license, my lawyer, because of you." I glanced at the disciplinary notice visible through the torn edge. "No," I said calmly, "because of him." A muscle twitched in her jaw. "I lost everything, my apartment, my friends. That bastard Drew even sued me. Funny. I cut her off, stepping into the space she thought was hers. That's exactly what you tried to do to me. For the first time in 7 years, she had nothing to say. The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the courthouse steps. Somewhere behind us, a bailiff laughed at a joke. Normal people living normal lives. She opened her mouth, probably to beg, to threaten, to spin some new story. But I was already walking away. "You'll regret this," she called after me, the desperation thick in her voice. I didn't turn around, because as my new lawyer's last email had confirmed that morning, the house was sold, the accounts were frozen, and the prenup she'd once laughed about, ironclad. The elevator doors closed on her still standing there, a shrinking figure in last season's Prada. My phone buzzed, a text from my brother. "Drinks tonight?" I smiled. Some endings aren't really endings at all, just overdue beginnings.